This is not a test. This is not a test. Please remain calm.
Unburied dead are coming back to life and seeking human victims.
Seeking human victims. Seeking human victims.
We are back. Welcome to Seeking Human Victims, the podcast on the One Good Scare Productions Network. I am your host, Dan Wilson, known in some circles as the Reverend, the devil you know, the maniacal minister of the occult. But today, I'm just Dan here with my pals at One Good Scare Productions. Starting off the season a little barren. We don't have the full crew, but we have enough of a crew. We have the founders of One Good Scare Productions. We have Miss Annie Wilson.
I'm glad to know we're such good pals. What's up, guys?
And we have Todd Johnston.
I'm also here.
You know them if you've followed any of our exploits here. They've been a part of all of the various projects we've done, but Todd is the host of the Art of Murder web show, as well as he was involved in the short film Sanctuary that we released, and Annie, of course, is my wife and is just does just about everything around here in some capacity or the other. She was the director of photography on the short film. She hosted her own web show very briefly, but it was cut a little short. But we're hoping to explore that maybe again in a different format here as the new season. So it's 2019. It's a brand new year for One Good Scare Productions. We accomplished most of what we set out to do in 2018. Hoping to do the same for 2019. We are already got the gears turning on the next short film and hope to make that an intriguing affair for everybody. But we'll have more on that later. That's not what tonight is about. Tonight is about the launch of the next season. So the first season, we focused solely on the ABCs of horror, what we felt were the quintessential horror films that you had to see really to get into horror fandom. And now that we've gotten those out of the way, what we're going to do in each season is tackle a different topic of horror. It could be a subgenre, it could be an actor, a director, really whatever we feel like is an appropriate topic, but everything, whatever the topic is, within that season is going to fit into that. So what we have chosen for the official season 1, now past season 0, is going to be the slashers. And we've got 10 episodes for you, so let's talk about slasher films for just a moment. What is a slasher film? Todd, what would qualify as a slasher film to you?
Okay, slasher movie, you gotta have a killer, the slasher, quote unquote. There's gotta be a body count. And there's always a lot of creative ways where the slasher's killing people in different manners. And sometimes, because of the Halloween franchise, you have a final victim, or the final girl, as they call it there. Maybe they do get killed, so you always have to have a last person alive. Whether you choose to kill them or not is up to the individual. But I think that's what defines it for me, anyway.
I would agree with that. I think there's also, some element of sexuality that it's not necessarily in every single one of the slasher films, but there's often a lot of boobs, and if you go into the Friday the 13th scenario or Halloween, there's like drug use or teenagers doing stuff they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
I think those are important elements as well, not necessarily all inclusive. But the slasher film has an interesting history. The grandfather of slashers is really Psycho, and that's really the first time you saw somebody getting stabbed with a knife on screen in that manner, and people being picked off one by one, etc. And then there was the Italian film Bay of Blood by Mario Bava. Black Christmas, of course, we covered on this podcast. It's a Canadian film. and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. All of those have been argued at some point to be the first slasher film. Halloween, we know, popularized the slasher genre, being a low-budget but very highly financially successful hit. This inspired an entire subgenre to follow in its wake, the first of which to make a huge impact was Friday the 13th. And Friday the 13th took the country by storm, copying the formula that Halloween had much success with, but taking it in a bit more of a campier direction, maybe more self-realizing, a little more tongue-in-cheek.
A lot more gore.
Not as great qualities of films, but certainly enjoyable in their own rights. And so beyond that, Friday the 13th blew up and made even more money than Halloween made. So you had a million copycats come after that. And the result were quite a trough of creative and bizarre and also very similar in many ways slasher films that started in the 80s, and still to this day you will see some occasionally pop out.
I'd say for the casual viewer, sometimes people that don't follow horror movies may think of slasher films like that's what a horror movie is supposed to be.
I think as far as horror movie tropes, like 95% of them come from slasher films. Think about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think if you go to the movies right now, they have that commercial about stupid horror movie tropes. If you are in a horror movie, you're going to make the dumbest decision possible. That's why you need Geico. This podcast is not sponsored by Geico, but they could be.
Yeah,
just saying.
Throw some bucks. We'll say Geico every chance we get. Geico.
It could be. So all of the tropes that you mentioned, I think, do come from slasher films, but they're not the only type of horror film by any stretch. And the reason you're not going to see some of the more popular slasher franchises in this season is because we have other plans for them. Friday the 13th there's no sense in covering that in this season because it's the whole reason this season exists. It did not get covered in the quintessentials of horror, no, but there's a good reason for that. That's an entire franchise, and we're actually going to give it the justice it deserves and give it an entire season coming up here very shortly in the next few upcoming seasons on Seeking Human Victims. So that's the reason you won't see Friday the 13th in this list of movies for Season 1. You will not see Nightmare on Elm Street. Why? Because Season 2, I'll go ahead and announce it, is going to be all about Wes Craven. So we're going to look at all of the important films of the late, great Wes Craven's career. So Nightmare on Elm Street, of course, quintessential in that, has to be covered. So we're going to save it. Not going to be covered in the slasher franchise, the slasher season. And we will not be looking at any prominent franchise sequels in this season because, again, we have a whole future season, the sequel to this season, which will be dedicated to slasher sequels. So what does that leave us with? Well, the criterion I tried to keep it with were films, didn't have to be standalone, but were at least at the time that they were made. So just a start to finish story, something original, something unique and interesting. And I thought, well, we looked at a bunch of older films in Season 0. We really ran the gauntlet of films from the 60s to the late 70s, and there wasn't much outside of that window. And when everybody thinks of slashers, they think the 80s. So I thought immediately people were going to be expecting certain slasher films. So I'm already throwing you curveballs right out of the gate by telling you no Nightmare, no Friday the 13th.
That's a good thing, though.
But why am I doing it? Because I wanted to kick this season off with a relatively modern slasher, which is something that has kind of gone by the wayside in recent years. There's been a bit of a comeback since this film came out. This film is responsible for that resurgence in many ways. Tonight we are covering Hatchet. So let's dig in.
The Coroner's Report.
All right, it is time to do the Coroner's Report for one Victor Crowley. We're looking at 2006 Hatchet. And this film is the product of the imagination of director Adam Green. Adam Green, like many of the genre legends we've discussed previously, started making movies as well at a young age at home films on a camcorder with his family members. But the story of Hatchet also comes from his childhood. It actually came about when he was 8 years old at summer camp. His camp counselors had told him a story about a ghoul who lived in the woods to try to threaten him, to get him to behave, of course. There was a ghoul that lived, as you do to children. There was a ghoul that lived in the woods named Hatchet Face that was going to get him if he didn't behave. So, of course, that sparked his imagination. So as he's going back to his bunk, he's thinking about Hatchet Face and his whole backstory and where he could have come from. So when he gets around all of his fellow campers, he relays the story of Hatchet Face that he's made up. And it's mostly what you see in the movie, that he was a deformed kid and the kids picked on him and his house caught on fire on Halloween and his dad came to try to save him, but he really hit him in the face with a hatchet. And so apparently all of the kids started crying and wanting to go home, and he almost got kicked out of the camp. So it was a great introduction to horror.
Too good of a campfire story.
Like, that sounds like, I'm not discounting or saying it's not true, but that sounds like the kind of shit that, like, a kid would make up and say. They're like, yeah, and then, like, a kid that was so scared by the story of Hatchet Face, like, yeah, but then, like, I told the story about Hatchet Face, and it made kids so scared they were going to pee their pants in the morning, so they were going to send me home. I totally didn't have to go home because I got scared and I peed my pants. It's totally because everybody else was scared.
Well, regardless...
I'm sure it really happened, Adam. I believe you.
The tallest of tales.
The Hatchet legend was born, and something that got tucked away in his mind for many years to come. But he continued pursuing that love of film, and when he got a job making commercials for a cable access station, like the really terrible, like Happy Motors commercials that you see, he did that in the Northeast, and that is where he met Will Barrett, who went on to become his director of photography then and still is to this day. And they stole the cable channel's equipment after hours and started making their own independent films with the equipment on the side. The first of which was a movie called Columbus Day Weekend in 1998. And the premise of Columbus Day Weekend is that, of course, all of these other horror movies take place on holidays, so Columbus Day Weekend does not have a movie about it, and it's apparently Jason and Michael Myers go to stalk the same campground and find them. But what's interesting about this, a lot of the early effects that later you see in Hatchet were sort of originally conceived here, if not necessarily executed well, but it was pretty interesting. So They made the first short, and Ariescope Productions was born, named because Adam and Will were both Aries. So they were like that. Well, it was kind of just, we got to have something to put on it because there's a title sequence, and we're trying to copy the title sequence of Friday the 13th. So Ariescope was born, and they eventually made their first feature, which was a movie called Coffee and Donuts, and it was made for $400 in the year 2000. And won the Smoky Mountain Film Festival. And in 2003, Touchstone Pictures bought Coffee and Donuts and employed Adam Green as a writer. And then they reworked the film to become a sitcom for the UPN network. The pilot episode was rejected, though. And then for the next 5 years, the copyrights remained with Touchstone. And in this time, UPN went out of business. So the the hopes of coffee and donuts were dashed temporarily. After regaining the rights in 2009, he tried to sell it to another network, got canceled again, eventually completely redeveloped it and called it Holliston and sold it to FearNet. FearNet went out of business as well, but they did get the first 2 seasons out. The 3rd season has been written and postponed numerous times, but it's fantastic if you haven't seen it. It's a great meta horror comedy sitcom, if there is such a thing. It's totally a sitcom about 2 horror nerds, but it's got all of your favorite sitcom tropes, but it's also R-rated. But the death of Odoris Arungus, who was a major cast member, certainly also, didn't help move the 3rd season along. So they say they're still working on it, but it's been a long time. So I do wonder if that's ever going to happen at this point.
So many roadblocks thrown in their way. What can you do?
Yeah, but anyway, not to go off on a Holliston tangent, but I just love that show. So while he was waiting on UPN to decide what they were going to do in that 5-year limbo period, Adam Green began writing the script to the Hatchet story that he came up with when he was a kid. And slasher horror was extremely out of fashion at this point. His agents told him, this is a lost cause. You just might as well give up. There's no way you're ever going to sell a slasher film in 2003. And that didn't stop him. He eventually was able to befriend and get John Carl Buechler attached, who's a legend in the effects industry, but also directed Friday the 13th Part 7 and has done the effects for many of the Friday the 13th films, as well as a few of the Halloween films. Halloween 4, I believe he did as well. He's been around and done it all, worked with all of the greats, so he was a great first person to attach to the project. And after he was attached, Kane Hodder was attached. And then the idea started getting some interest in Hollywood. And there started being some people that were listening to his pitch. So what he did to really seal the deal is they went and spent a minimal amount of money. Now, he said in interviews it was $4, but I think that's probably an exaggeration. Maybe not. But they spent $4 to film a fake teaser trailer in the swamp in New Orleans. So they basically went down, took one of those swamp tours, guerrilla filmed over the side of the boat to get footage of them going over the swamp and shit, and released this teaser trailer that, the Victor's coming, it's his swamp, things like that. And it got such a buzz online that people claim to have seen this fake movie that didn't even exist. And we're telling people, oh, you got to see this. It's old school American horror. It's the worst slasher since Jason. It's all of this stuff. And, Adam Green appreciated it because he was like, sure. Thanks.
It doesn't exist yet.
But it was the buzz from that short film or not the short film, but the teaser trailer, the fake trailer, that eventually attracted the investors. And they got the funding they needed to make Hatchet a reality. And normally, here in the coroner's report, I will go over the casting process, because we like to go before the movie here, but I'm going to go ahead and switch it over to the auditorium.
Step right up and enter a world where the mortal man will find facts that defy imagination. What strange truths and morbid curiosities will be revealed inside the auditorium.
All right, now why did we jump to the auditorium so early? My dog even wants to know. Well,
mixing it up.
The casting is one of the most fascinating parts of this movie to me. In so many ways. Because you see so many independent horror films that are cast with ensemble casts of genre legends, and they're dreck. because they spent every dime they had on getting these guys to come take the payday, and not that they're giving a bad performance, but they're not giving them much to work with in the first place. And so generally speaking, when you see a movie chocked full of genre legends, it is very bad. But one thing that Adam Green has done here with Hatchet, and that Rob Zombie has successfully done in his films, is he has taken these genre legends and put them in the most the most useful positions possible. Their strengths are maximized and their weaknesses are hidden the most in these roles. You have them as supporting characters who you're happy to see when they show up because they generally have limited screen time. Robert Englund, one of them, one of the first ones you see. The first two people you see are pretty much genre cameos. Robert Englund, the legendary Freddy Krueger, plays Samson Dunstan, the father of our heroine, Mary Beth. And then his son, Ainsley, is played by Joshua Leonard, star of the original Blair Witch Project.
Oh, okay.
And so you have like genre cameos right off the bat, but in the perfect spot.
It's a good mix though, because you have like the super well-known actors like Freddy and the maybe lesser known faces where it's like, I've seen that guy, but it's not distracting. But still, it's okay that Robert Englund's there because he's a big name. And it's just like kind of an almost throwaway cameo right at the beginning. It brings you in, gets you ready for the mood of the movie, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's a way you can use these guys to really give your stuff legitimacy. And then there's another way, I just compared to independent wrestling. It's like you can use these legends out touring the independent scene, trying to hustle a buck well and tell a good story with them and get people to come back. But most people just pay them their fee and trot them out there and have them wrestle whatever piece of crap that they have to throw out there with them.
Here's this guy.
And that happens a lot to these poor guys as well. So it's so awesome when you see it done the opposite and they're used to give credibility to the film. And they definitely were here. And then Tony Todd as Reverend Zombie.
Oh, always great.
And some great auditorium facts about Reverend Zombie in many of the interviews and things I've heard with Adam. He talks about Tony Todd could not come to New Orleans to film his scene, so they had to go to him. And they filmed it out in the woods, and they built a little set that
just behind that door?
Like the door, yes.
That's cool.
But the door was the wrong fucking door because it was supposed to be based on a real shop in New Orleans. There's a real Reverend Zombie's voodoo shop, and there's a sign and there's a door. And what they did when they went and filmed the tracking footage and all and the B-roll, they filmed the neighbor's door. So the door they got in the movie they had to copy was the neighbor's door and not the door to the actual voodoo shop, which defeated the fucking purpose of going down there to film the door, because if it was just going to be any random door that wasn't that door, then why did they have to go to New Orleans to film it?
They blew it. But you wouldn't notice unless you're like a super crazy New Orleans aficionado. Oh, that's the wrong door. They meant to do the other one, but whatever. That's like maybe 10 guys.
And Tony Todd was written in as a small cameo in this one, but the film was originally envisioned as a trilogy. And so if this one was successful, he hoped to do more. And in the second one, Reverend Zombie is revealed to be a huge part of the mythology. So it's nice to get a little teaser of him here. He's a real shyster. He's a great character. He comes out with his voodoo presentation and his mystic dialogue. And
that voice, man, I could listen to him read the phone book and just listen in awe.
But then, of course, course, it's even more hilarious when he starts talking about the guy who scammed him on the insurance settlement, and he starts getting very street.
Just grounds him in reality like that.
It's another great cameo. When I hate saying genre, like that's a thing, but
Everything's a genre.
right, everything's a fucking
Doesn't make
genre.
sense.
But what I'm saying here specifically is like horror or comedy or other niche entertainment genre people.
It's like there's nothing else to say, so it's just genre.
Right. Like Joel Murray, the brother of Bill Murray. Cameos, bit roles, major roles. He's been in everything under the fucking sun.
Oh, yeah. Particularly the 80s. It's in every 80s movie.
Yup. And then Jack Cracker himself was John Carl Buechler, the previously mentioned special effects artist and director of Friday the 13th Part 7, but also an actor, and played the piss-drinking Jack Cracker.
Boy, did he ever drink that piss, man. It was gross.
With a gusto.
He sold it. I completely believe that was piss.
And his famous line, "Swamp's closed! Where the heck you going? Swamp's closed!"
Drinks piss.
And then, I mean, how could you forget Richard Reilly? You might not know him by name, but you know him by face, because he's jumping to conclusions. From Office Space and literally dozens of other movies and television shows. He just is one of those faces that you recognize the second you see him, playing the fatherly tourist, the elderly gentleman who gets unfortunately chopped in half by Victor Crowley. He's fantastic. His wife, Patrika Darbo, was a star of soap operas. She was a regular on Days of Our Lives and Bold and the Beautiful, and a longtime professional character actor. And then Mercedes McNabb, who played Misty, the blonde of the two ditzy chicks in the party.
The ditzy chick.
Harmony Kendall was her name. She is well known as Harmony Kendall. I'm sorry, Harmony Kendall was from Buffy. That's who she played in Buffy. I'm looking at my notes wrong. And she played Amanda Buckman in Addams Family Values. If you don't remember her by name, she was Wednesday's rival in the Girl Scout troop. And then to round out the parade of genre all-stars, we have Dionne Richmond, who's been in Scary Movie and a dozen other things as well, comedy-wise, but will always be remembered as Rudy's little boyfriend, Bud, on The Cosby Show. The thing for child actors becoming adult stars in this film. And then rounding out the genre legends, of course, is Kane Hodder, who plays Victor Crowley, and reprising the similar role that he played as Jason Voorhees, but I think he adds a new element to it with the grunting and he's a little more ferocious and erratic. Jason's very deliberate. Victor Crowley's kind of sudden and everywhere.
Yeah, he's kind of the Friday the 13th Part 2 Jason, if he's any version of that Jason character.
He's also Victor Crowley's dad.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he gets to show up in person.
He used to show some emotion and cry.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that drew him to the role, actually. There's another fact for you. He was really not interested in taking on another Jason-type role right out of the gate, but he read the script and he really liked it, and what really sold him was the part of playing the father of Victor Crowley, and he really felt like he got to show off some acting chops there. He gets to cry and be emotional, and that's something Kane Hodder never gets to do, and he's a legendary stunt coordinator. He's probably more well-known behind the scenes than he is as Jason, and now Victor Crowley, but it was really cool to get to see him in that role. Great dude. We got to meet him at Days of the Dead last year in Atlanta, and he spent forever fucking talking our ear off. Was just the coolest guy. He will choke the shit out of you, though.
Yes. Yes.
Like, when you pose for your picture, he grabs you or something, so
Just goes around choking people.
yeah,
Yes.
it's his thing. He's just into it.
And nobody says anything because if you're at a horror convention and Kane Hodder comes up and grabs you by the neck, what are you gonna do except for
Just
nerd
accept
out? Well, you're not just gonna accept it. You're gonna creep your pants. You're gonna be like, Kane
This
Hodder
is what
took
I
me.
wanted.
Right, I've dreamt about this.
Yeah, definitely go see Kane if you get a chance and he's at your local convention. He is one of the most personable dudes I've ever met at a con. And he doesn't really even want to talk about his work. He just wants to ask you about your life and learn about what you do for a living. And he's fascinating guy, just really fascinating. Also, has a great documentary. So I'm on Amazon Prime right now, but also released on Blu-ray through Dread Central Presents the To Hell and Back story, the life of Kane Hodder's really, really strong documentary. And so the cast, those are your genre people, but then we also had Joel David Moore as Ben, the male lead of the film, who to me and you will always and forever be JP from Grandma's Boy.
Such a memorable role.
Please sit on my face.
I love that movie. As a quick aside, I feel like me and a few people that I know love that movie, but I don't ever hear that movie talked about in circles. That Grandma's Boy was this great comedy of its era, but it was.
It was. It's probably because all the other Adam Sandler verse movies are so terrible, you just kind of forget about that one because it came out at a weird time, I guess. And it didn't have Adam Sandler in it.
I've always lumped that movie in with the 40-year-old virgin group of movies.
Well, it was around that time too, so it was just kind of a hidden gem.
Yeah, and like what else came out around then? Knocked Up and shit.
Yeah.
And then we had Tamara Feldman as Mary Beth Dunstan, and that's your main character in the film, and she really was great in this, I thought.
Except for when she was crying.
Her crying stuff was
Specifically, my daddy! He got my daddy!
Well, it's such a reversal. She comes in like this badass with a gun and dark past, and then she kind of just crumbles after seeing her family members dismembered.
Yeah,
And
which
gets
so to speak.
real country.
Oh yeah.
that is one thing, because Danielle Harris plays her in future sequels, and
Recast.
she very much sticks to the country southern accent the entire time, whereas Feldman, she kind of went in and out with it, and that was about the only inconsistency that really bothered me with her performance, was that I felt like she did kind of slip in and out of the real thick southern accent from times. It was just, if you're going to make the choice, go one way or the other with it. But I thought she was really strong in the character. She was very believable, and she had to be badass and boss everybody around and tell the story of Victor Crowley and, be that person.
Yes, she was much less believable as the emotional side of that character. Which is great because that was only a small fraction of the character. So
yeah, I thought she did a great job anchoring the film as somebody you did want to root for and see succeed and overcome the evil. And then the only other person I will mention is Perry Shin, who doesn't really have a history of much outside of these movies, honestly. I think he's also maybe done some soaps and some other, smaller parts, some television stuff, but he is hysterical as Sean, the boat operator.
I thought of him as the Asian Cajun.
That's what he was going for.
Yeah.
So
Cajun.
just this total shyster. It was only his second boat trip out into the swamp. He ignores all the warnings and goes into the restricted part of the swamp and crashes the boat and gets them all killed, of course. But just such a hilarious shtick with him being a total fraud and trying for the really bad Southern accent, and then, of course, getting incredibly Asian when things get tricky. It was a great performance, and he ends up becoming a very important part of the franchise. They do some really hilarious shit in the sequels with him. He's in all of the movies, even though they killed the shit out of him in this one.
Yeah.
Like, he has a relative that comes looking for him in the next one. It's just him again.
And they're like,
That's a hilarious way
wait,
to
he's
do
like, no, I'm his cousin.
What, you say we all look alike? That's one of the lines, I believe. But it's one of my favorite bits of that ongoing in the Hatchet franchise.
Which, to be fair, he does say, I just moved down here from Detroit, and my cousin said that he gave me this job and said I could make a bunch of money.
Oh, so he's referenced in the movie.
Yes.
Yeah. So he exists beforehand. This was the long con.
Some more auditorium facts. They kept Victor Crowley out of shot while they were filming, and they did not let him get near anyone on set until he was in the frame. And that's a Kane Hodder technique, apparently, something he really likes to do all of the time. But in particular, a lot of those terrified jump scares were legit, and they are relentless in this movie. Like, once it gets going, he has such great pacing with when he pulls the gotcha moment out, because it's every time it goes on just long enough that you think, okay, they're settling into like some dialogue, there's going to be some problem solving here, they're going to rest a minute, then they're going to go back and get in a fight with him, and like, no, then he's right the fuck right there, like up their ass.
That's his whole shtick, is just jumping out, just yelling at the top of his lungs. Sometimes he pops up in the middle of a crowd, which is surprising.
Oh, when they're like, my favorite one is when they're like, okay, which way do we go? And she goes, this way. And then exactly where she points at the end of her finger, she's just like poking him in the chest. He's like, hey guys.
Here I am.
It's me, Victor.
And the scares are just so relentless from that point forward. It's just boom, boom, boom. And it does strike that great balance of comedy and horror. I wouldn't call it a horror comedy, because to me, I don't feel like it set out to make you laugh first and foremost, but I feel like the humor carries it.
It seems like primarily a comedy, almost. I mean, it's hard to peg, really, because the comedy elements are so strong, and a lot of the kills are funny, but I don't know.
That's Adam Green's signature. I don't know how familiar you are with his other movies,
Not
but that tends to be a thing he does, is that everything for some reason is also just like, it's almost like self-aware of how ridiculous some of the situations can be. So it's just funny. Like, that he's like, just go with it and make it funny. Because, I don't know, I feel like that's just kind of a description kind of maybe of his life, even.
Victor Crowley is just so, like, he is played completely straight and scary and menacing and horrible. But, like, the circumstances, everything else around it, depending on how fucked up your sense of humor is hysterical.
Right.
And those fucking kills, the effects in this movie are so good.
They happen super fast, too. Like, usually you'll savor those kills, like, oh, he's really gonna rip this person apart. But, man, he just goes right in there and does it, and it's over.
The head rip from Mrs. Permateo is one of I will stand here and say it is one of the best kills ever in horror films.
Yeah.
Ever.
Well done.
We've said that for years. That's one of our favorite kills.
It reminds me of the moment in King Kong where he pulls the T-Rex's jaw apart to kill him. But
and it's one shot. If you notice it, you start making movies. You start looking at movies with that lens, which sucks sometimes, but it doesn't bother me because I'm still an idiot that doesn't know what I'm doing, right? I hear these guys, Adam Green and Joe Lynch, these guys talking on their podcast about how they've done this for so long, it's hard for them to watch any movie without consciously going, oh, great shot, that, without being able to get sucked in. I'm still a moron who doesn't know what he's doing, so I could still get sucked in. But
you almost have to watch it twice when you're like that. So it's like, okay, this time I'm just going to watch it as a movie now that I've picked it apart a little bit, or do it separately. I don't know.
The way they did that in one shot, or at least what looks like one shot. I mean, there's got to be a cut in there somewhere.
It seems seamless.
But it looks like one shot. They go all the way around her while he's pulling her jaw back.
Fancy editing techniques, if at all that's what they're doing.
And it's on the special features, and I need to watch it because they do explain how it's done. I just didn't have time to watch that before the episode, so because I was already scrambling like a madman to make notes here. But yeah, John Carl Buechler deserves all the credit in the world for the effects he pulled off on this movie. So many gruesome kills. The belt sander to the face.
Oh, yeah, that was rough.
That first debuted in that Columbus Day weekend short they were talking about. Of course, it was much less refined, but that's where that idea came from. And Victor Crowley just has the most random assortment of power tools as well, as you'll see in the second one when he pulls out like a 30-foot chainsaw.
Oh.
It's like the most ridiculous shit.
Here's my chainsaw. It's ridiculous.
Another great auditorium fact was Adam Green would use psych-out tricks on the actors to get reactions similar to what we'd mentioned about keeping Victor Crowley out of the shot. One hilarious story was that there was a rubber hatchet that he had convinced Joel David Moore that it was out of commission, so it got fucked up, some didn't work, and so that they were going to have to use a real hatchet. And it was a scene where he threw the hatchet at his face. And so Kane Hodder was throwing a fucking tantrum he was like, no, fuck, are you saying I'm not a professional? I'm a goddamn stuntman. I won awards for being a fucking stuntman. I can do it. I can fucking do it. And so, of course, before Joel David Moore can even realize what's going on, Adam's like, all right, go, action. He's like, wait, hold on. And he takes it, and of course he throws it, and it goes in his face, and it was the fucking rubber one all along. They were just fucking with him, but that reaction he got of that hatchet coming at his face was real as shit.
Perfect, yeah.
So that really entertained me. It was one of my favorite stories for the auditorium of this episode. So, yeah, I felt it important to include the casting, like I said, just because that's an anomaly, and they really got the most out of everybody in this movie. Let's take a look at how it did. Numbers of the Beast. I have no Muji here, so I'm starting to try to learn how to do math on my own. Be patient
Math
with me.
Muji.
Just be patient. So the numbers. Hatchet by the numbers. It was selected for several film festivals right out of the gate in 2006, so it started getting buzz there upon its release. So it's a little bit different because this movie comes out in a totally different era than the movies we talked about before, where they would do like staggered regional releases and things like that. It really is a situation where you go out and you tour the film festivals and you try to get some following and buzz there, and then that allows people to bid over it, and you can get distribution and or maybe find a way to distribute it on your own. But this dominated the film festivals in 2006, and then it hit the theaters, and it didn't have the best showing in theaters. He had a big battle with the ratings board. They kept giving it an NC-17. They limited its theatrical run. There were all sorts of troubles that he ran into from the logistics side of putting it in theaters. The theatrical distribution was really more so the issue than the film itself. It was just he ran into all kinds of issues with that, in part due to the rating. So, because of that, the theatrical take was about $240,000. $240,396 is what I've gotten online. As with all movies, these numbers are pure speculation because we didn't see the receipts, and most filmmakers will tell you that they don't even know really how much their movies made because the distribution companies screw them all over. But it made about $240,000 on theatrical release with a God, I cannot talk tonight. $1,500,000 budget, $1.5 million. So theatrically, it was not looking good, but it was released during an era where DVD rentals were at their all-time high, and so it made $6 million in U.S. rentals during its first 3 weeks, and it sold over 597,000 units in North America, translating to a total take of around $8,262,721, and so it made its money back and then some ultimately, even after having a weak theatrical showing. And I can see why Adam laments a lot on his podcast that model is kind of gone, the DVD rentals, and that ship is kind of dried up with streaming. You get pennies on the dollar compared to what you used to get with that.
They were saved by the DVD.
Because there hasn't been a movie, and now with the current model, I don't know if there could be a movie that could be sustained on home video sales, even with VOD, if you didn't license it out. But the critical reception was mixed. It sits at about a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't think a lot of people got what this movie was going for, that it was, there was a lot of satire there, but also part serious horror film. And a lot of people didn't really appreciate it. To me, it's one of the best horror films of all time. Of the recent couple of decades, it is the slasher film.
It's just so much fun. It sets its own tone, kind of, because it's unlike any other movie from that genre. Even it's a different sort of thing.
Yeah, it really is. It's. I read this article in Fangoria, the new Fangoria, and it's great. Pick it up. I'm not trying to shit talk them at all. I just disagreed with something that was in there. There was an article called "The Bastard Sons of Michael Myers," and it was about all of the various slasher characters that have been spawned as a result of copying Halloween, starting with Jason, and then, of course, and I mean, we went down the list. We had Silent Night, Deadly Night. We had Terror Train. We had Tourist Trap. We had My Bloody Valentine, Happy Birthday to Me. Like, we had, just hundreds of these slashers that spawned off of the Michael Myers family tree. And then it ended the article with, but the slashers died out in the 80s and we haven't really seen a resurgence, but maybe, just maybe, this new Halloween movie that's coming out will save the genre and bring back slashers. Man! They brought back slashers in 2006 with the first Hatchet movie, and we have had a slasher icon that deserves to be mentioned, and who's way better than a lot of those fucking guys you mentioned, and Victor Crowley. So
it almost makes me think they were trying to omit it just to support that final sentence. It's like, oh, well, if I mention Hatchet, then I can't write the sentence that I want to write, so it's not there.
Yeah, it was terribly overlooked. So, and I mean, I don't know if the guy who wrote the article didn't like Hatchet or whatever, but
I've never seen it somehow. No.
I don't believe that. It got quite a cult following. It spawned 3 sequels, a comic book, action figures, Halloween masks, T-shirts, and lots of other merchandise, including a novel. The most recent Victor Crowley, there's a book called I Survivor that's being hawked by Perry Shin's character in the 4th movie. And Adam actually went and wrote the book and sold the book that's that character's story from the Hatchet film. So it's even spawned a fictional novel. It's a juggernaut for an independent property. And it really is the thing that launched and still sustains Ariescope Productions. Without Hatchet, there wouldn't have been Frozen, which was Adam Green's most critically acclaimed movie. And a movie that I love, but it's totally different. It's more of like a suspense Hitchcockian type of horror movie compared to the all-out gore fest that is the Hatchet franchise. So I look forward to covering some of the other Hatchet films in the sequels seasons when we get back to those. But I can't say enough how inspiring the story of these guys really is. They started out just regular Joes. They, by hook or by crook, weaseled their way into the Hollywood system and have somehow managed to still make a living all these years later. And at times, you know, they'll be the first to admit it, at times just eking it out, but it's all thanks to Hatchet and Victor Crowley. So right before we get out of here, we know you just watched the movie. If you listened to the episode but didn't watch the movie first, I don't really know what to tell you. But so real quick, if you haven't watched the episode, you can go watch it right now on demand. I believe it's on Hulu, Amazon Prime, Tubi TV. Hatchet is all over the place right now on streaming, so go check it out. And if you did not see it for some reason, we will go ahead and cover it for you on The Burial Plot.
It is now time to uncover The Burial Plot.
Samson and Ainsley Dunstan had gone gator fishing, but a few days later they turned up missing. Now that isn't uncommon in this Louisiana swamp, where old Jack Cracker drinks his piss and the alligators chomp. 'Tis a swamp full of mystery, sorrow, and grief, where a vengeful spirit waits to devour fresh meat. If at night you're out there prowling and hear a mournful howling, please don't sit there scowling, because you may just be the next to meet Victor Crowley. Daddy! One would think those wives' tales would scare folks away, but the local swamp tours can't turn down a payday. This works in favor of young Mary Beth, who knows all the tales of murder and death. She'd stay away too if she had her druthers, but she's here to find her father and brother. She hops on the scareboat with a real motley crew, a porno director, and two girls partially nude.
Bayou Beavers, take 5.
Woo! An old married couple and Bud from the Cosby Show. Really, JP from Grandma's Boy and an Asian hillbilly.
My name is Ben in this movie.
Hip hip, howdy y'all. Welcome to the scareboat.
When the incompetent tour guide inevitably crashes the scareboat, it begins to sink into a boggy, gator-filled moat. They barely escape some way, somehow. The swamp tour promise rings true. If you were there, you'd be scared by now. Mary Beth Dunstan decides to come clean about the danger that awaits, and how an encounter with Victor Crowley would surely seal their fate.
It was like a dirty secret. He was born horribly disfigured. His daddy hid him away and they kept to themselves, alone. The other kids, they teased him and tortured him. They were so cruel. Then one Halloween, some teenagers came to the house. They was trying to get a look at him, scare him out of the house. But they set the house on fire. His daddy tried to get him out, but the door was on fire. So he went and he got himself a hatchet and he started chopping at that door. But Victor was pressed against to the other side, trying to get out. And it was an accident, but he hit him in the face with that hatchet. and poor Victor Crowley died. And that old man, he finally died of a broken heart. Then people started disappearing in the swamp. The old hunters and townsfolk say he's come back, and he wanders the swamp at night with that hatchet slashed across his face, looking for his daddy and killing anyone he finds.
Most don't believe her, but they'll die all the same as one by one Victor starts taking names. Mary Beth finds what's left of her father and her brother. And Victor Crowley gruesomely butchers the tour party one after the other.
The good Lord will protect us.
It all comes down to Ben and Mary Beth. They fight Crowley tooth and nail and pray for his death. Once he's been set on fire, shot and impaled, they make the smart move and fucking bail. They find the Dunstons' fishing boat, and I'll be damned if the thing still floats. They escape to the swamp and try to get farther, but Mary Beth gets pulled under the water. When she climbs to the surface, she sees Ben's hand, but there's no body attached, just the Louisiana boogeyman. The end.
And hard to do a radio play parodying something that is very satirical in and of itself. So I have no idea how that came out as I sit here, but we're going to give it the old damned college try, pals. So, as we end this episode, I'm really happy to be back in the saddle here for the podcast. Really happy to have covered Hatchet, and I hope that I have exposed this film to someone who has not seen it. If you are a fan of slashers and there's just been that something missing in your life in modern films, you need to check this out. You need to check out the whole franchise. What do you guys think? Where do you stand with Hatchet?
Well, you did expose this movie to me for the first time, and I really enjoyed just the fun nature of it. And they take a different approach to the creature kind of movie where they're not afraid to show the creature. Usually, like, a more artsy film maybe would hide it and, like, just barely show them. And then toward the end, you see the full reveal. It's the guy in the rubber suit, whatever. But the creature effects were really exceptional, so they didn't have to, I mean, that's just not what they were going for. They didn't have to hide him. He's just bursting out, yelling at every moment. He reminded me, the look of him, it reminded me of if the basket case monster was a full man. But in a really good way, not a silly way, because that thing looked like a little rubber puppet. This was a horrendous creature.
Don't you talk no shit about basket case.
No, I love that. Love it. Just a different kind of film. They were going for a different thing. But Victor Crowley looks really good. I really love the scene in the cabin where you see Victor Crowley as a young... We didn't really talk about the casting for that, but that he was really eerie. It's probably creepier in that scene than in the whole rest of the movie. And you see a different angle to that character too, because there's really a sweet relationship between him and his dad, and I really appreciated that. So
yeah, the young Victor Crowley was played by Riley Vanderbilt, who was actually went on to marry and divorce the director Adam Green. But yeah, she was the young Victor Crowley. So interesting that it was played by a girl, even. I guess, and all that prosthetic, you couldn't tell who was under there.
Yeah.
Until you told me, and then as soon as you told me who it was, I was like, oh yeah, that body from like neck down where there's not prosthetics, I was like, that's 100% a very small statured girl. Because the shoulders, it was when in the truck, curled up, and I was like, dudes can't do that.
You gotta hunch over so you don't see any boobs.
Right. But, well, you know how I feel about this movie. I bought this movie for you. Yeah. I love this movie. It's one of my favorite horror movies. It has my favorite kill in it. It makes me laugh. It The jump scares get me in this. I appreciate the entire franchise. Love all of them. I mean, I don't know what to say. I like it a lot. I like it a lot.
Well said.
A lot.
Yeah, that's very true. We were in Walmart one day, and she picked that up and was like, "I'm getting this for you." It's like, okay. It's like, this looks like something you love. I mean, she was right. It was a fucking DVD with a Hatchet arm on it that says old school American horror.
Oh, so this is just a random pick.
Yeah.
This might be good.
Yeah, I was like, this looks like I asked him if he'd seen it, and he said no, and I was like, well, I'm going to get it for you, and we're going to watch it.
It was an impulse buy at Walmart, of all places.
The land of impulse buys.
Where you can't buy an album that has curse words on it. As I spill my coffee, you can't buy an album that has curse words on it, but you can buy Hatchet and watch a 50-year-old woman get her face ripped apart.
That really doesn't make sense.
Thanks, Tipper Gore.
But I'm happy for it, because without Walmart and my wife, I would never have been introduced to what has become one of my absolute favorite horror franchises of all time. So thanks for joining us here on the Hatchet episode. We will be back next week with more. What are we going to do next week? We're going to go and look at what some of Tom Savini's early effects work looked like. It wasn't Friday the 13th, but I think some of the kills in this are even better than Friday the 13th. And I just got a sweet shirt from Cavity Colors on their Black Friday sale reflecting it, so it's fresh in my mind. So that's what we're going to do next week. The Prowler, here on Seeking Human Victims.
This is not a test. This is not a test. Please remain calm.
Unburied dead are coming back to life and seeking human victims.
Seeking human victims. Seeking human victims.
Die and rise again.
who's to blame? Will they ever stop taunting me? They start the flame. Even though they are just children, now I feel the fear. With a saddened life against the door, I feel the pain. As my father tries to save me, he seals my fate. His life of grief upon the end, there was never hate. And I shall live all of my days undead, to die and rise again. Die and rise again. Die and rise again. Die and rise again. Rise again. Rise again.